Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the EmbellishPod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram or TikTok at EmbellishPod. It's all the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up all of these links and episode details and maybe even a little bit more. Today, listen, I don't know how the fuck this happens sometimes. I got an email about potentially having an author on for an episode. And I always love talking to authors because they're always fantastic storytellers. It's the kind of people that I can give one question to and then they talk for 3 or 4, maybe even 10 minutes, right? Remember Zach from Blackwood Distilling? That dude's a writer and has been for a very long time. And you can tell in the way that he has passion, he tells the story. But today we're going to have on Larry Kasanoff. And that name may not mean anything to you, but if you do a quick Google, you'll find out. This guy has been an executive producer in some of the biggest names of movies that have existed for a very long time. He's been tied to significant projects. Projects like Dirty Dancing, projects like Terminator 2, projects like True Lies. And you may not remember True Lies, children who are millennials. Maybe you don't remember that movie. But when it came out, it was a big movie. And so obviously I say yes. Obviously I read as much of his book as I can. I think I made it through about 180 pages between the time that we agreed on the interview and when we actually had the interview. And it's not for a lack of it being interesting. It was just a lack of time. So we're going to have a fun conversation with Larry today. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be consuming this particular episode of the podcast. I have a man joining me that has produced or executive produced over 250 film features. If you look at, since 1987 to now, there's more years that you have a line on IMDb than there are that you don't, which is incredibly impressive. But there are, names like Terminator 2 and True Lies and Platoon and Dirty Dancing and Mortal Kombat, the entire franchise. Also a founder of a couple of different things, whether it be, Threshold Entertainment or Lightstorm Entertainment, like just all of these things, right? Your name is Larry Kasanoff, and I want you to kind of give me maybe the 30-second version of who you are and kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I'll give you a little story. It'll take me a minute. So I'm a film producer. I wanted to be a film producer since I was a little kid. And I got very lucky. And out of college, I got a great job in the mid-'80s as head of production acquisitions and finance for a company called Vestron. And Vestron was an independent film studio rising up on the tide of home video, which then was like streaming today. So in other words, there was no home video, then they would need tons of movies from video. There was no streaming, you needed tons of movies for streaming. So my first job, I got this great job as head of production acquisitions, as I said, and my job was to deliver 80 movies a year, 80. Most studios today make 12 movies a year, but I had to deliver 8. Lower budget movies, but movies. So we made like very commercial films, rom-coms, action movies with kind of B-level stars in them, horror movies and things like that. And then one day we got a script for a movie called Platoon. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a very different kind of movie. It's a great script. It's about the Vietnam War and the effect it had on all the kids who went to it, more the psychological effect, and I wanted to make it. And my boss at the time, who was a great disruptive entrepreneur, said, listen, this isn't the kind of movie we do, but I fought for it. People weren't famous. They became famous. The director became famous, but he wasn't famous at the time, although he was still a great director. We had done another one of his movies. And my boss said, look, it's up to you. You're the head of production, but there's always a but. If it fails, you're fired. What are you going to do? And I thought, oh my God, I got the greatest job in the world. But then I thought, well, I didn't get into the movie business to play it safe. So I greenlit Platoon. When I saw the movie, I'm the only guy in the world to laugh their way, to giggle their way through the screening of Platoon. Not because it wasn't good, because it was so good. I kept saying, oh my God, I'm not getting fired. I'm okay. And in fact, it was so good, it won Best Picture that year at the Academy Awards. A few months later, I ran into the director at a bar in New York, and he bought me a drink, and he said, you know, kid, I always liked you. You have a touch of the madness. And I thought, touch of the madness? But the touch is a little, madness is crazy. Is he calling me crazy? Am I crazy? Am I a little crazy? And then it occurred to me, my boss Austin at Vestron, he was crazy to give a 25-year-old kid responsibility for an 80-picture film slate with no prior experience.
Mhm.
Oliver, the director, had a touch of the madness by insisting on making a Vietnam movie that we no one else had. And I had a touch of the madness by betting the best job in the world on one movie. And that's when it occurred to me that the current of the river of life will always pull you towards the middle. And if you want to be great, certainly in a creative field, you got to swim away from that current. And the best way to do that is with innovation. That's what everyone talks about, innovation. And the best way to be innovative is to embrace your madness. So that notion of have a touch of the madness, embrace the madness, do the crazy, wild, and the idea that everyone tells you is not, it will never work. That's been my bellwether my entire career. And through the production of all the other movies I've done, that's been my North Star.
So, and I was able to read, about that particular experience and a lot of other things. I mean, obviously, if I put your name in a search engine, you get a whole lot of things. But you've given us maybe a Cliff Notes version of that by creating a book called A Touch of Madness: How to Be More Innovative in Work and Life. And that's a really long name for a book, but just A Touch of the Madness works. And there's something about creative genius being able to acknowledge that early on in life that you now have a catchphrase, right? Like a superhero. You got your own catchphrase.
Look, I have my own hats.
Yeah, it's phenomenal branding, and that's always fantastic. And I like the fact that it says madness instead of crazy because that has a different connotation, maybe.
It's different, and it's not even. It's not a touch of madness. It's a touch of the madness.
Right.
Yeah.
That the is doing a lot of work in there,
right,
from a language perspective, and I appreciate it. But you mentioned in there, right? So you were talking about Platoon, and you're betting your entire job on it. As a 25-year-old, it can be a really monumental decision, but also sometimes at 25, your prefrontal cortex is barely developed at that point in time, right? You just sort of stopped at that moment in life, and men are a little bit behind women maybe in development, so maybe you're still kind of somewhat immature. After you've kind of made your way through your career, if you look back at that moment, did you really fully understand the gravity of what that meant? Like now you know what your career is and you risked it on that decision. Does it kind of give you a little bit of a yip inside?
Well, no, I think I was pretty aware of the risk I was taking.
Mhm.
I mean, I really did. I think I was young enough and brash enough to think, well, it's a great job, but I can still find another job.
Mhm.
But mostly, I just really, really, really had an incredibly strong instinct to make the movie. And honestly, although I could Monday morning quarterback it all day long, we had co-financed the movie with the director called Salvador, which I thought was great. And I loved the script was great for Platoon, but mostly I just thought the instinct was right. No one had ever done this, and I thought it was time, and I just get this feeling, and so I decided to bet on it. And I was in a very entrepreneurial environment, and those were very entrepreneurial days.
Yeah.
It was the late '80s. People were doing well. There was a lot of money around, so I didn't agonize it over too long, to tell you the truth.
Mhm. And I think one of the other things that you kind of did in the telling of that story is you're undersold by a little bit, right? The director who helps you coin this catchphrase has a pretty big name as well, right? It's not just a casual, um, small tier director, right?
Oliver Stone.
Right, Oliver Stone. Like this is a big name when it comes to what movies are today, and your name is attached to a lot of those. The Oliver Stones, the James Camerons, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, all of these different people. But you specifically, you came from Boston, right? You went to one of the oldest schools in the country
Yep.
before you went to college. Then you go to Cornell, and then you go to Wharton. Um, that's a pretty severe pedigree and the fact that like there's a lot of opportunities that could have been in front of you. How do you land in show business at that point?
When I was a little kid, my father took me to see a James Bond movie.
Mhm.
And when we left the movie, I said, okay, two things. I want to be James Bond, but who's that guy that says producer? And then it could be Broccoli. What does that guy do? And my father explained what a producer was, and that was it. I mean, I was like, I don't know, 11 years old. That was it. And I decided that's what I was going to do. And all those places, like going to Boston Latin School, which is a school in Boston, which is a private school, but it's free if you do well on a test to get in. since I was a little kid. I was like, I'm going to pass that test. I'm going to get to Latin school. Latin school will get me to a good school. My parents were wonderfully supportive, but didn't have any money. And when I get to good schools, I'll do I'll make contacts somehow. I've been plotting this since I was 11 years old.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm going to save this question for later, but I'm going to go ahead and tee it up. At some point we're going to have to figure out, for your perspective, what's the best James Bond actor in history. But
easy. Yeah.
Oh, so it's easy. Okay. Who is it then?
Well, I don't like saying the best because every actor is great, but I would say Sean Connery is my number one. But Pierce Brosnan is, it's really close. They're both phenomenal Bonds. Because you know what? I want James Bond to have style and elegance and grace and a twinkle in his eye. And that's such a hard, charismatic thing to pull off. And those two guys have it.
Yeah. I grew up in a household that is Sean Connery's the answer to that. So we
there you go.
You've mentioned a number of times, that you've produced / executive produced. As a person who is not in the industry, what does that mean? Like, what does executive produce or producing a movie specifically mean?
So those titles aren't scientific. They're not, the same thing as maybe some other titles in other companies. But if you look at movie producing for a second, which most people don't understand because it's unique, and look at real estate development. Let's say where you live, one day you're driving around and you say, wow, that's a beautiful field and there's a stream behind it. I'm going to put in a new kind of shopping mall and it'll involve nature, and I'll get a great tenant, and I'll get Target to come in, and we'll have a big theater, and we'll have an IMAX theater, and you put it all together, and you get an architect to draw plans, and you get someone to lend you the money. You get a bank, and you get your anchor tenant to commit, and you put it all together, and you borrow the money, and you build it. So up until the point where you start building it, it's very similar to being a movie producer. You get an idea for a story, somewhere you make it, write it, find it, and then you have to package it with actors and a director who's like the architect, and get the money and get it distributed, and so forth. Where it differs is there's an execution that's different. When you say to the bank on your building, it's going to look like this architectural plan. This is what the building's going to look like. Halfway through the building, the architect isn't going to say, you know what, I decided to throw in a fifth floor. I mean, we didn't plan it, but I got But in a movie, the execution risk is different. You can't plot out with absolute certainty, well, look at this great script, it's perfect. There are great scripts. People say, oh, you got to have a great script to make a movie. Well, that's actually not true. There are not great scripts that are hit movies. There are great scripts that are failed movies. It's an execution risk. So at that point, it gets a little different. But up until then, it's very similar to kind of being a real estate developer of something a bit more amorphous.
It sounds like a wonderfully terrible experience trying to put together a script which can be a work of art and a movie which can be a work of art and make them tie together, right? Because those two things maybe are in some degree of tension. But early in your career, you're tasked with pushing out 80. You already mentioned most places are only doing 12 a year. Do you have like really well harnessed ADHD? Like how do you it seems like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but you can understand, I wanted to do this since I was a little kid. I've been on the, it's 11 o'clock in LA where I live. I've been on the phone since 7 o'clock this morning talking to various partners and people in other countries about future movies. I still want to do it as much, if not more, than the first day. So I never really think of it as work. I know that's almost a cliche these days, but I never think of it as work. It's a blast. It's crazy. That's why you got to embrace the madness.
Yeah, and I'm going to go backwards a little bit. You had this phrase, and I've seen you say it before in other interviews. The current of the river of life will always try to pull you towards the middle where complacency and mediocrity exists. Is this a thought that you sort of developed prior to the book, during the creation of the book? After?
No, I wrote the book for a specific reason. We had a year here after the pandemic where there were writer and actor strikes, and we really couldn't work. And so, and the combination of the pandemic and the writer strikes and the kind of politically correct movement made it very hard for people to take creative chances, not just in my business, but everyone. And I was whining to my brother during that year of the strike saying, boy, everyone is so scared to be their true creative selves. And he said, well, stop whining, write a book. So I did. And I think we're kind of in a lost generation. I don't mean just younger people. I mean, just in general, lost generation in terms of being creative, in terms of taking risks. And whether you are working in the toaster business or the movie business. And I believe that's everything. And so I want to change that. I want to inspire people and challenge people to have their own, be their most unfettered creative selves, and just go for that risk. I meet so many people. I give speeches a lot now too. I meet so many people who say, "Well, I have this great idea for a donut shop, and I don't know." And I keep saying, "Do it, do it." That idea that you think it's crazy, my family will kill me, my partners will kill me, that's the one. You can't get out of your mind. Do it. That's it. That's why I wrote the book. I've been thinking about it for a long time because I experienced it, but I hope that with the book and the speeches I give along with it, we're able to inspire people to take that, embrace the madness.
You know, and you talked a lot about risk in that little segment that you're speaking to there, and you know, Platoon is kind of the place where you took a big risk and you saw a huge success, but it doesn't always work that way. So, you know, kind of give me how do you deal with taking risks and then not meeting the success that you sort of expected to see come out of it?
You know, it's so funny because on interviews like this, which I've been doing a lot of because of the book, people like me say, "Oh, well, it was this hit movie, and then that hit movie, and then I went to the beach, and this hit movie." It doesn't work that way. There's a million movies that take a long time to get made, or that aren't hits. They're not all hits. But you know, you look at American baseball. If you bat 300, so 3 out of 10, you're amazing. Look at being a boxer. You know, if you're a boxer and you win your fight, you still get hit 50 times every round. And I do a lot of I make martial arts movies, and I study martial arts a lot. And when I first started taking martial arts, if I got hit, my trainer go, "Oh, I can't believe I got hit." You know, I go, "Oh, I can't believe," and then he hit me again. He goes, "No, you don't stop and go, I can't believe I got hit. You just keep going. That's it. That's all there is to it. All the movies aren't hits. They don't all work. If it doesn't work, you think, what can I learn from this experience? What's my tuition here? If you think of it as tuition, and then move on. And you go make another one."
And you know, some things end up being a win that you don't understand, right? And so in the book you also talk about Blood Diner. In the book you present it as a win, but you've said kind of outright that you didn't necessarily understand the script. You can't fully understand why it has appeal decades later. And some of this is about trusting instinct. And you know, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You say a win is a win is a win is a win. You take it no matter what. But how do you kind of quantify these back into a system of, you know, you take a risk, you see a success, and you understand it so you can replicate it?
You can't. You cannot blueprint success in the movie business. You just can't. Blood Diner, you're referring to, at Vestron, where we had my first job, we had made a lot of low budget horror movies. And we got pitched this movie called Blood Diner, which was just so crazy. But the director had a great touch of the madness, and I liked it. And it was just somehow the concept stuck with me. So sometimes we would have our art department make and order a poster, thinking of they were low budget horror movies. So if the marketing was good, we could make enough money in the movie, and maybe it was worth it. And the poster that came back from our department was gorgeous. It was like a kind of old Art Deco diner, and it said Blood Diner, first they greet you, then they eat you. And I thought, that's great. And I still remember this, just years ago, I still remember thinking, one day I'm going to be glad that I did this. Because even though I don't understand the script, and I don't know, but my team wanted to make it, I greenlit the movie. And the movie made a ton of money. Whether because of the poster or not, I don't know. And then right before the pandemic, or right after, I forget, I got a phone call. Would I come see a midnight screening of Blood Diner at Quentin Tarantino's Art Film Theater in Beverly Hills? And I'm like, Blood Diner? You got to be, I'm being punked. I'm on a show. Where's the cameras? And it turns out that it has been screening it around the country for years. But I did follow that one instinct. I'm not saying that one instinct is always right, but I look for a touch of the madness. If I'm going to embark on a movie and I can't find anything that I think, well, this is wild and crazy. In the case of Blood Diner, for me, it was the marketing. For me, those in my team might tell you differently. But if I can't find that one thing, I don't do it. And the Blood Diner, first they greet you, then they eat you. I couldn't get it out of my mind, so I did it. Today, that would be harder. You'd have marketing staffs, you'd have all kinds of people. We didn't work that way then.
Yeah, I often wonder if a world where cult classic movies happen sort of has gone by the wayside, you know, because I think of, you know, some of the stuff that Kevin Smith has done, or you know, the way kind of, you know, Rocky Horror Picture Show has taken off, a place where you take a bet, you send a movie out, and then it maybe didn't get wide appeal, but it also didn't get wide coverage, and so somebody finds it 50 years later now. with a more
Listen,
limited subset of
everything
development.
repeats itself. If you look at Obsession and Backrooms, which are
Mhm.
great projects and deserve all the success they're getting, but then you can go back to Blair Witch Project
Mhm.
or Paranormal Activity. I mean, it's always, or Easy Rider in the 70s. This always happens. That
Yeah.
those the people who did that had the nerve to try something different and to take a risk. But it's not new. We think it's new because we have short memories, but it's not new.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe that's the reason why people keep doing things. They say, in basketball, the best shooters have a very short memory, right? Because 40,
Yeah, yeah.
45% is great percentage in shooting in basketball, and that means also that you're missing more than you're hitting. But not remembering the losses is probably as important as remembering the
There's a
wins.
study I've read a lot about exactly that in athletes, the ones who swung and missed, that ancient history. The
Mhm.
next half a second later, when you're ready again, you don't even think about it. You
Mhm.
got to develop some of that in the movie business. You can't,
Right.
or I think in a lot of businesses, everyone no one bats 1,000.
Well, I mean, and I've kind of in my own professional life, I've kind of used the phrase of like, if you never fail, then you're likely never really trying anything new or
Yeah, you're not
novel,
trying it
right?
out. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I
it's
agree with that.
you're taking very, very safe bets, but you know the concept of risk is the underpinning of the entire book, right? The whole book. I think I did a quick analysis on it on a word count concept, and it's going to appear in most of the pages, and we like to talk about the wins, and I sort of alluded to this as well, but the poster instinct bets that never became classics. How do you just forget those, or do you kind of keep them in the back of your mind, or do you hire somebody to do the research and tell you 20 years later that Blood Diner is this huge hit that you never knew about? It just wasn't ready.
No, I mean, unless from either the wins or the misses, the hits or the misses, you can learn something. I forget about them.
Hmm.
I don't, I'm not mad about them. I'm not regretful about them. They just don't exist for me anymore. Sometimes people ask me about a movie of mine that's kind of obscure. I think maybe I act like I don't want to talk about it. I literally don't remember. I just don't think about it.
Right.
You take what you can learn and just move on.
Well, I guess if you're responsible for producing 80 movies a year, even for 3 or 4 years, it'd be real easy to lose track of anything you've done. And not necessarily everything that's produced ever makes it to widespread release of any type whatsoever. But we've got 30 years worth of evidence, and at least 25 of those have some sort of a byline on IMDb. I couldn't keep up with that myself, right? I have a hard time remembering what I said yesterday, much less you know, something I wrote 15
You
years
know,
ago or whatever.
we when I did the first Mortal Kombat movie, no successful movie had ever been made based on a video game.
Mhm.
And everyone told me again, this happens a lot in my career. You're gonna lose your career. This is crazy. What are you doing? No one does this. But I took the shot, and thank goodness I did. Now it's 30 years later, and we're still making Mortal Kombat movies. So that, thank goodness. I mean, that's
Mhm.
great and that's fantastic, and I'm grateful for it. But then I think, okay, well, what's next? I really spend most of my time only on shows like this, so I spend a lot of time thinking back. Other
Mhm.
than you ran into an old friend or something. Mostly, I think, what's next?
Mhm.
That's how I think all day long.
And I'm glad you mentioned Mortal Kombat because it was on the list to get to, and you think like a storyteller, so that's fantastic. The Most people forget, right? Because you said it. There has never been a game that made its way to a movie in a successful way prior to that. But we all kind of think back, to the 80s and 90s, all of these successful video games that were attached to movies, but usually the movie came first and the video game came afterwards. And so you don't think about how groundbreaking it is to take something that is meant to be 5 to 7 to 10 minutes worth of play outside of a Walmart or in a department store in the 80s and 90s, right? Because that was a lot of video game consumption earlier, was through arcades, and turn that into a full-fledged movie, and not just one full-fledged movie, but a whole bunch of them is incredibly impressive. You talk about it a little bit in the book. Can you give me a little bit more of the magic of how that happens?
Well, the way it happened is the arcade game company had made an arcade. Arcades are where you used to go and put
Mhm.
money into a machine, if your audience doesn't know, and play a video game that was stationary. And they had done our Terminator 2 arcade game, which became the most successful arcade game ever. And I got friendly with the company. It was in Chicago, and I was going to Chicago, so I called up to say, "Oh, let's have I'll come by to have lunch and say hi." And they said, "Oh, you got to come by because we have a game that's testing in an arcade. It's testing so well, it's going to beat your record on Terminator 2. And I said, we can't have that. So I went to see them. I played there were only two versions of the game, one in the CEO's office in Chicago and one in the arcade that was testing. I played the game in his office for 10 minutes, and I turned to him and I said, this is Star Wars meets Enter the Dragon, my two favorite genres. And if you give me the rights, I promise you I will make this not only as a movie, but in every medium in the world. Movies, TV, animation, music, live tours, and so forth and so on. And he said, piece of crap video game. This was the CEO. No one believed it, even them. It took me all summer to convince him that it was a whole universe. And that's what we did. But the secret is, I never thought I was making a movie from a video game. I thought I was making a movie from the essence of why that video game was a hit. So to me, if you're making a movie from a book or a video game or a toy or anything, it's not that specific medium. It's why is that successful? Why is that project, that book, whatever, successful? And if you can get that essence, you can put it in all the media incarnations of it. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense, because I think most people who are voracious readers, they read a book and then the book becomes a movie, and then they go watch the movie and they're like, the movie's wrong, right? Because the book was better or whatever. But the best versions are the ones that just said, here's what I understand about the identity of this book, and then made a movie based off of that, instead of the only other option is making a literal translation. And that's, the Lord of the Rings folks, where they had to make a 6-hour-long movie to be able to
when you buy the rights to a book, you're really buying a short synopsis, because you're going to change it into the script. So there's got to be some secret sauce there that's better than just the short synopsis. And if you grab that essence of why is that a hit, then you got it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, this is the way that people want to consume things. They want to kind of bring their fantasy world that they've created in their own head and see it laid out on film, which is not film anymore. It's all digital at this point. But we're both old enough to remember that.
Close enough.
Right. And I guess maybe some places are going back to using film. I have heard of that.
Yeah, some people are. Yeah.
It provides a different kind of version. But I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the chapters in the books. And so I want to hit some high points, right? So there's the Ask chapter, where you talk about just ask things. And you've got a story about kind of Guns N' Roses in this Ask chapter. Kind of give me a little bit on that one.
So I think there are 3 steps to embracing a touch of the madness. One is you got to create your idea, and you got to understand the essence of your idea and understand what the audience wants. The second is ask, and the third one is play. Ask. Once you have your idea for whatever it is, not just movies, you got to be willing to ask everyone, any place, anywhere, for anything that will help you achieve your goal. And so a quicker example, then I'll tell you Guns N' Roses. During the pandemic, we did an animated movie with Universal called Bobbleheads, and we wanted Cher, the quite legendary Cher, to be in the movie and use her likeness as well. And everyone said, there's no way you'll get her. She's never done an animated movie. But we called, and they were great, and she did it. And after the movie came out, People Magazine interviewed her and said, why did you say yes to this movie? You've never been in an animated movie before. And she said, I say yes to this one because prior to that, no one ever asked me until Larry called. And so if your audience thinks to yourself that one of the most iconic, famous people in the world had never been asked to be in an animated movie in your own life, can you imagine who you're not asking a question for because you think, oh, they're too busy, they won't have time for me, sure they won't. So I would challenge, I always ask people when I'm speaking, if you could call one person in the world and ask them to help you with your project, who would you call and why? And most people don't have a ready answer. That's because they don't think. We're not brought up to think that you can do it, but you can do it. So I would challenge your listeners right now to, whatever day you hear this, by the next Friday, call someone, whether it's your Cher or your Uncle Bob who doesn't come to Thanksgiving anymore, and ask, what do you got to lose? Once you get that muscle, you go, oh, not everyone says, it takes my call. Not everyone says yes, but people are generally speaking pretty nice. It changes you. So ask is not only a big tenet of what I'm trying to inspire people to do here, but it's the easiest one to do because everyone has someone they can think of to call and ask something for.
Yeah. I think we've got to stop asking questions that we think we already know the answer to. That's what most of us do.
Well, but people are scared to ask questions. So Guns N' Roses on Terminator 2 at the time was the most expensive movie ever made. So we all wanted to make sure that, you know, we did every promotion we could, and to get the word out. And in those days, MTV played music videos 24/7. And if they liked your music video, they'd play it 15 times a day. It was phenomenal promotion. So we got the idea to do a music video, and Arnold was not contractually obligated. He didn't have to, but he was great during the whole production. And I said, will you do this? And he said, I'll do it on one condition. You get the best band in the world. And I said, great. Who's the best band in the world? He called his brother-in-law, who's in the music business, and he goes, He goes, Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses was the best band in the world then. And I said, sure, no problem. I can get Guns N' Roses. I didn't know Guns N' Roses. I had no idea how to get Guns N' Roses. But long story short, through a series of asking all these incredible asks, asking the city of Hollywood to let us put on a fake Guns N' Roses concert on Sunset Boulevard, to getting the record company to change the whole release pattern of their of Use Your Illusion, the Guns N' Roses album coming up. We got people to do it, and it did become it won a fan contest as #1 video of the year. It played 15 times a day, and it worked simply because we kept asking. It is the most important thing, I think, or one of the most important things I can try to convince people to do, because it works and you get no downside.
You know, so there's we've kind of hit two of the three components that you just mentioned, and one of the other ones being play. Um, I wonder if they're, you know, when you get into the portion of the book and you talk about play a little bit, which one is probably the most, maybe the most important in your mind for someone to absorb that story, to be able to generate, you know, the play concept that you want people to understand?
So in a state of play, which is hard to be in all the time, that doesn't mean be an idiot and take, you know, and do something stupid. I mean, if you are a professional football player, you're playing a game every day, but it's still your business.
Mm-hmm.
But in a state of play, you're more creative, you're happier, you're more relaxed, you think more, you do better things. So I'll give you an example where I wasn't in a state of play, and I should have been. We had a movie that I inherited from my company. In other words, I was head of production except for this art film division, and then they transferred the art film to me because a lot of the movies weren't working. And there was a film that had been shot, and it was premiering soon, but we just had to redub the lead actress's voice. Mm-hmm. It was she was great. She was pretty famous at the time, but it was just nothing else we could do. And it wasn't her fault. There's a lot of reasons that can happen, and so forth. Anyway, so the guy who used to run the division now reported to me. I asked him to do it. And in those days, premieres, we had these big premieres, these huge premieres, because of press. You get all this press to come. It wasn't like now we just can do it on social media. And so we're 5 minutes out of the screening starting. There's 1,500 people in the audience, press everywhere, famous press. And I said to this executive who worked for me, what did the actress say when you told her we had to redub her voice? And he said, oh, I didn't tell her. And now we're 4 minutes away, and I'm sitting next to her at the premiere, not for anything personal. You know, I'm the head of the studio. She's the lead actress in the movie. There's press there. The whole movie, I'm sweating. I'm thinking, oh my God, what's she gonna do? She's gonna. This was so wrong of us not to tell her. I didn't know that he didn't tell her, and I'm just so nervous the whole time, which just ruined the screening for me. Finally, the movie's over. There's applause. I go like this. She looks at me and she goes, well, I was just great. I can't believe I was that good. I had no idea. Thank you. And she, unless she's listening to this podcast, she still doesn't know. Mm-hmm. Not being in a state of play did nothing for me other than ruin the 2 hours. And had something gone wrong, I wouldn't have been right to receive it. In a state of play, I'm right to receive it, and it's fun, and you do the right thing. And there's so many examples of that. We somehow think that doing something fun at work, we can't do it. I mean, when was the last time you said, you know, to your staff, we're all going bowling this afternoon, and maybe we'll think of that idea for the product we want to think about. Do it. Have fun.
Mm-hmm. You know, and you said in there, you wouldn't have been ready to receive it, right? And I think there's kind of this undertone of, I don't, maybe spirituality is too much of a woo-woo term to apply to it. But what do you mean by being ready to receive it? Like, what's the it that you're receiving?
I meant if there was information that was bad, if she did something wrong, if she didn't respond correctly, I would not have been in my best self
Hmm.
to do it. I would not have handled it well because I was nervous and tense and I wasn't looking for opportunities. There's a when I first started, the first movie I ever worked on, I did not greenlight right when I got hired. It was sort of, today we would call it a low budget Game of Thrones, but there wasn't a Game of Thrones in those days. And the Austin, my boss, said to my development staff and I want everything in this movie. It's the first movie we were going to make, not co-finance, but make. And I want violence, and I want sex, and I want sword fights, and I want magic. And someone in my team yelled, snakes and wizards. And we all went, yeah, snakes and wizards. And it became our little cry. And the producer of the movie, we were the studio, and I was the executive producer. The producer of the movie was already in Italy starting prep in the movie. And every time we got off a conference call with him, someone would go, and remember, snakes and wizards. So I get to the movie, my first movie, said it seems to be going well. The next week, the crew tells me they have a surprise for me on Thursday. So Thursday comes, they're all excited. We gather at lunch in the back of the studio. It's in Rome. It's just hills, nothing but hills. And I see a little dirt, and the dirt's getting bigger. And I realize there's a truck coming down the hills. And then a band starts playing. I don't know where they got a band. And then as the truck it backs up, you see it's brightly painted with like balloons and stuff. It looks like a circus truck. And it comes up to me, and it backs up, and everyone's surrounding. The back opens, and out pours a ton of people dressed as wizards with snakes, like 12-foot Burmese pythons. And everyone applauds. They got us our snakes and wizards, except snakes and wizards was a joke. There were no snakes and wizards in the script. There were no snakes and wizards in the movie. But you know, I'm in Rome. I can't believe it's so exciting. We have a little wine at lunch. And I'm thinking, if I yell at these people, how could you do this? This isn't in the script. We should have been more clear with you, but it's not in the script. I'm going to lose the crew forever. I mean, they're not going to be, they tried something. They were very happy about it. So I'm trying to decide what to do. So there are two factors involved here. One is that one. And the other one is, honestly, it's hard to say no to a Burmese python staring you in the face, just 12 feet long. So I said, put them all in the movie. And everyone cheered. And we put them all in the movie. And there was no place for them in the movie. We just threw them in the... Now, to tell you the truth, the movie's terrible. I mean, it really is not a good movie. But it made a ton of money. And the snakes and wizards looked great. Not in a state of play, I would have screamed at them and sent them home. Would have been the worst mistake in the world.
I like the fact that you have a very strong, candid nature in talking about the movies that you've kind of ran through. You know, you said the movie's terrible, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you think it's terrible or I think it's terrible. It matters whether someone likes it, right? Everything is made for someone, maybe just not me, and that can be okay. And especially this is a money making business. And if it made money, that's the measurement of success that really mattered, maybe more so than what you thought.
So when we started the first Mortal Kombat movie, we were in pre-production. We had a class of like maybe sixth graders, someone's kid's friend or something, to come in to show them how we make a movie. And we're showing them how we build sets. They loved it. Some of the fight rehearsals, they loved it. And then we showed them the character designs in Mortal Kombat. And they love it, love it, love it. And then we come to this character called Kano. Kano in Mortal Kombat kind of has a metal eye patch. And that's a little bit, not really, but a little bit like Arnold in Terminator 2. And so we decided to redesign it. And as we're looking, these kids are all happy. And when I said to Kano, one kid starts saying, he starts breathing heavily and goes, Kano has a metal eye patch. And I said, well, I just did a movie called Terminator 2. And that character kind of has metal in his eye. And I thought it'd be a little bit the same, and I would be a little bored doing it. And he goes, but Kano has metal eye patch. And I said, well, but not in our movie. And the kid literally was starting to hyperventilate. And then I realized what was wrong with everything I just told you. All I said was I just did this movie. I wanted this. I didn't think it would be fun. Who gives a crap what I want? My job is to work for the audience. And the audience, as clearly portrayed by this kid who was about to pass out, wanted Kano to have a metal eye patch. I took the drawing down. I ripped it up. We went back. Kano, for the last 30 years, has had a metal eye patch in the movies. Because it was not about me. It's about, what you just said is completely correct. It's about the audience. It's all what the audience wants. On Dirty Dancing, so we got Dirty Dancing out of what's called turnaround, meaning some other studio started it and then stopped it. And we had no experience making a musical, and we managed to lure a genius named Jimmy Einer, who's still a partner in my company today, to come in and supervise Dirty Dancing. He then hired a great music supervisor named Michael Lloyd. So now we have a good crew. And when they got to the song Time of time of my life, which had been started, had been recorded. It was a high falsetto kind of disco-y song, and Jimmy didn't want that, so they re-recorded it in a lower, more ballad type way, and then he sent it to everybody. You know, the director of the movie, the manager of the artist, all kinds of people, and the agents. No one liked it. Everyone said, Jimmy, you got to make these changes. You got to change this. You got to change that. And he was incredibly gracious. And he said, sure, no problem. I got all your notes. Just give me a few weeks. 3 weeks later, he sends out version 2. He says, thank you so much for all your notes. Here's version 2. I also sent it to a radio station. Radio stations in those days really helped you promote records. And they seemed to like it. Everyone came back saying, we love it. Thank you so much for changing it. That was great. That was brilliant. It was so nice of you, so open of you. Fantastic. So what genius thing did Jimmy do between version 1 and version 2? What did he change? Here's what he changed. Nothing. He didn't change a thing. He changed the label. But because he said, I sent it to the radio stations, they liked it. Everyone said, oh, must be brilliant. That song won the Grammy and the Academy Award for Best Picture, for Best Song that year, because they didn't change a thing. Jimmy knew, and Michael too knew what they had, and they didn't change it. That's what you got to do. You gotta. A touch of the madness isn't just I got a great idea. You then have to have this incredible zeal, this crazy perseverance that I don't care how long or what it takes. I'm doing it, and I'm not listening to anybody. You know, everyone says listen to everybody. I'm telling you to listen to the audience. Other than that, don't listen to so many people.
Right. Yeah. The key stakeholder is the person who's going to shell out their money. Right. That's everyone else.
Well, but again, we are custodians for the audience.
Right. Yeah. So I wonder a little bit, right? I think about the kind of the 3 tenets of the create, the ask, the play. It feels like, you know, they exist in maybe a 3-dimensional plane or in a triangle or whatever, and you sort of kind of range your existence somewhere in concert with all 3 of those things. Maybe more create, less play, less ask, maybe more ask, more play. You know, like it works its way through that. How do you continually make sure you're staying within the confines of those 3 concepts, right? Because it would feel really easy to drift out of it, right?
I think for me, the question is I want a touch of the madness, but when do you go too far? When is it a ton of the madness? And you don't want too much madness. You don't want to be batshit crazy. You just want to be creatively unique and kind of wild. That's the question I've wrestled with back and forth over time. We were developing a military movie, and I've done a lot of stuff with the military, movie-wise, and for the movie, I said, you know, it'd be cool to go and land in an aircraft carrier at sea and then spend a night there because we do a lot of research. And I didn't really think about it. Someone on my staff really loved the idea, and they took up to do that. And 2 months later, they came in and said, okay, we're cleared. The Navy approved us. We're going to the aircraft carrier. Now, I never really thought this through, you know, and I'm really not that brave. And so we go down to Southern California where there's a Navy Air Force base. And we get briefed, and we're wearing flak suits and crash helmets and those little radio gizmos and life preservers. And I'm like, this is really real, because we're all going to go in this small transport jet. And inside the jet are fully inflated life rafts. And they give you instructions, like if you hit the drink, go in this raft. It's not like under your seat and you're going to blow it up. It's right there. So I really started to get a little nervous. And I pretended I had to go to the bathroom, and I went to call my then girlfriend to ask, should I do this? Now, my then girlfriend was an Olympic gold medalist in martial arts, a master equestrian, and a leading stunt woman. So probably I knew what she was going to say, which is you got to go for it. So I went for it, and it was scary as hell, but it was great. And after all these incredible things, we were in a small meeting with the admiral, and he said, any questions? And I said, can we go water skiing after lunch? And I thought that was hysterical. I don't think they thought that was funny at all. And then all the pilots kept coming up to me, the Air Force pilots, who, you know, get off landing on an aircraft carrier with the tie still buckled, not a hair out of place. It's amazing. And they said, oh, how'd you like landing? And I said, it was kind of harrowing, because it is harrowing. You just dive straight down. And they said, oh, takeoff is worse. I mean, takeoff is way worse. And I'm like, uh-oh. And now I'm thinking, how the hell do I get off this? Maybe I can row. You don't even know where in the Pacific you are, by the way. They won't tell you. Maybe they have a helicopter. It turns out takeoff is not easy, but it's way not worse. I think they were just screwing with me because my joke went too far. which
Mhm.
was well played on their end, if that was the case. And that's just kind of fun. But it's just a question of when do you go too far? And
Mhm.
like again, no one bats 1,000.
Can you point to a time when maybe you did, you hit a ton instead of a touch?
Well, I mean that time was a bit too far.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think of fun examples. I once when we when we went to film markets like the American Film Market or the Cannes Film Festival. I always had a big suite because my whole staff would convene in my suite morning, noon, and night, meetings, scripts, deals. Everyone on a million phones going, and then everyone had keys, but I was also sleeping there. And when I leave, a lot of my staff would try and play practical jokes on me, which I was pretty good at catching because my brother and I played them on each other our whole lives.
Mhm.
And I figured out who was doing it. And at this film festival, it was this woman who was just you'd never think she'd do it. Innocent looking, sweet, wonderful woman. And at this film festival, again, another snake, but someone was selling a horror movie with a snake in it. They had a Burmese python. I seem to run into Burmese pythons a lot. And I made a deal with them to dress up as the mail guy that night for our staff meeting and knock on the door, and I'll come and get the mail from you, but in it will be the Burmese python. So that happens, knock on the door, I said, oh, I'll get them in. And I grabbed it and I said, oh, this is mail. It's for you. And the girl was sitting cross-legged on the floor, phone here, phone call. And I dropped the bag the mail bag in her lap, but it wasn't mail. And it was like a shot in the movie. The bag fell down. The snake went like this and just stared at her. And the place blew up as if I had thrown a concussion grenade into it. I mean, there was one guy there was like 300 pounds. He jumped on a table. People screamed. People ran everywhere. I later learned that there are people who have primal fears of snake. And simply seeing a snake, it's like allergy, can send them into shock. So fortunately, that didn't happen. Now that was too far. I mean, that was just me just not really considering what maybe I should. Fortunately, it turned out well. No one ever played a practical joke on me again at that company, so that was good. But that was too far. That was me just wanting to play and showing my staff, kind of who's boss in a fun way. Too far.
I agree wholeheartely with your staff. The snake is too far. I'm
Yeah.
not a snake person. I don't have a primal fear. It's not gonna send me into shock of any type. But not a snake person.
No. Turns out a lot of people. I seem to run into Burmese pythons a lot. I don't quite understand why, but no, yeah, that's not good.
And we're getting relatively close to time here, and I want to be cognizant of that. Maybe a couple things here, like so. Where should I buy your book? Where should I see you? Are you going to be anywhere anytime soon? Do you have any projects coming out that we should be paying attention to? How do we give you money for the things that you're creating?
That's nice. So my book, A Touch of the Madness, is available on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. You just order it. It's also available on Audible. So me telling the story on Audible. I had to audition to be to get the gig to do my own book, and fortunately I got it. But I thought, wouldn't that be funny if someone was a better me than me? Anyway, but it's on Audible and Amazon. And then we've got a lot of movies coming out. I don't really announce movies until they're done. But mostly I believe that the future of the film business is globalization. So we have all these movies scheduled to shoot all over the world. Western China, the Middle East, Africa, things like that. And you'll hear about them when they come out. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. And I guess one last thing, and maybe this kind of alludes to things that you don't talk about because they're not released yet, but your name has been affiliated with a concept for a Tetris movie for like 10 years, right? Are we ever going to see that? Is that going to happen? Like, I read, I was digging into it. I was like, oh, this sounds really, really interesting. And not like that, the Tetris biopic that talked about how it was made. I'm talking about
right.
Just
it's
Tetris
not going to happen for me.
Uh-huh.
But the reason is it's a lot of,
yeah.
A lot of times movie reasons, they're just kind of boring business reasons. It's no big deal. It's a long time ago, but business wise, we love Tetris, genius game, but not from us.
Yeah, and that everybody wants it maybe to be far more interesting than it is because it's show business and it's mysterious and it's crazy to us. The people that don't participate in it on any level whatsoever aside from consumption based. I guess we're right at the end of time. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you?
No, I thought you were really thorough. It was fun. Thank you.
All right. Well, Larry, thank you for giving me a little bit of time today. I know it's, you can make a lot of things, but you really can't make more time. And so anytime somebody's willing to share some with me, I'm always super duper appreciative. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using EmbellishPod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can also be found at www.embellishpod.com. It's all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.